Welcome back to Marlins 9. As always, I'm your host, Jeremiah Geiger. Glad to be back recording. I took a week off last week, but now the podcast is back in full throttle. And this episode, I'm going to be reviewing the draft, how the Marlins did, give you my thoughts on the big signings and PJ Morlando, Carter Johnson, the approach they had to the draft. And I'm also going to be taking a look at the deadline. Trade deadline just around the corner in just a few days. So it's very important for the front office to kind of, set the groundwork for the future. And it begins with the draft. It begins with the trade deadline. Every transaction should be improving this team for the future at this point in the year. The Marlins, though, coming off a really impressive series against the Baltimore Orioles, my brother's favorite team. So it was nice to see them take 2 out of 3 against one of the best teams in Major League Baseball. But the Orioles struggling with the bullpen, and then you had to have Jazz Chisholm Jr. absolutely go off in this series. Absolutely played out of his mind the last few games, and it's great to see. It's great to see Jazz play this way, considering all the media talk around him, how teams are saying he's not a fit for their clubhouse and whatnot. It's great to see Jazz just going out there and playing baseball. But we're going to get things started with talking about the draft. So, obviously, the Marlins decided to go with a high school bat. They decided to go with PJ Morlando out of South Carolina. He's an outfielder, big-time left-handed swing, lots of power. He consistently shows off on tournaments, home run derbies. I mean, the exit velocity is there. The power's there. 400-foot plus bombs. The raw skills are there. However, a lot of trade experts, or draft experts, I should say, a lot of draft experts had him going later in the draft, more of a second-round talent. I wanted to see the Marlins go after a college bat, and I think that was kind of the mentality around a lot of the fan base. The expectation, I should say, was that the Marlins were going to go after a college bat. A lot of mock drafts, almost every mock draft I saw, had the Marlins taking a hitter from the college ranks. But the way the draft fell, and right before the Marlins picked, 2 picks before that, Cam Smith goes off the board from Florida State. That was definitely a bat that a lot of fans wanted. It seemed that the Marlins completely pivoted and decided, okay, the guys that we wanted from college aren't on our list anymore. They're off the board. We're going to go under slot. We're going to take a guy who we think we can sign for below slot value, save some money from the overall bonus pool, and use that money elsewhere later in the draft. And that's exactly what they did. They drafted PJ Morlando, ended up signing him for a significant amount of money less than slot value, and then used that money later in the draft for players like Carter Johnson, who I really like out of Alabama. Carter Johnson was their second pick. High schooler, University of Alabama commit. He ends up signing with the Marlins for above slot value, as expected. And those are 2 of the guys that kind of set the standard for this draft. The rest of the draft, you had a very college offensive approach. College hitter after college hitter. You had a few college pitchers mixed in there. Took a couple high school pitchers, Grant Shepherdson to name one. But those first 2 picks kind of outlined the approach for the Marlins. They wanted to save money once the hitters they liked were off the board. So they took Morlando, and according to Peter Bendix, he was the best player on the board. I don't buy that. Just call it what it is. They wanted to save money to allocate the rest of that bonus pool later in the draft, and they did. They executed it. They executed that approach. However, and this isn't a slight to Morlando, this isn't a slight to Carter Johnson, there were a couple players, albeit not Seaver King, albeit not Christian Moore, who I was hoping for, and not Cam Smith out of Florida State, there were a couple players who I thought were better selections, plain and simple, in the first round. No matter what your approach is for the bonus pool and how you distribute that money, Carson Bench and Ryan Waldschmidt were the two guys I really wanted to see the Marlins take at number 16. You can't control what's ahead of you. There's no trading up draft picks. It's not like the NFL. You had to see where the board was going to fall. And it fell to a point where, although those guys like Seaver King and Christian Moore weren't on the board, you still had Ryan Waldschmidt. You still had Carson Bench. College hitters, arguably more advanced in their development, that I believe can contribute in the majors sooner rather than later. Ryan Waldschmidt in particular. I really like Ryan Waldschmidt. Diamondbacks end up getting him at pick 31, I believe. And the Marlins go with Morlando. So for me, I was upset. I did not like the pick. I understand why they did it. I understand the approach they went with. But right now, I don't like it. I would have rather them gone with a college hitter, especially one of those two, Benj or Waldschmidt. I would have been very happy with. And of course, we're going to see in a couple of years how this all ends up. The Marlins could end up having the best player in the draft. Morlando could turn into a superstar. We don't know. That's the thing with the draft, with the MLB draft, is we just don't know. We have to let these guys develop. But I wanted to share my thoughts on the draft. At that point, with the number 16 pick, Ryan Waldschmidt was right there. Advanced hitter out of Kentucky, right-handed swing. Carson Benj will hit left-handed and also pitch, by the way. But Waldschmidt, good exit velocity, good approach, shows a ton of plate discipline. Like, he is an advanced hitter. Okay, he's played multiple years of college baseball. It felt to me like that was a guy who could quickly advance through the Marlins farm system. And the same for Bench. For me, it was Waldschmidt 1, Bench 2. They go with Morlando, very talented, but he's going to need a lot of development. He's a high schooler, 19 years old, a little old for high school, but he's going to be in there for a few years. You're not going to see him debut next year. That's just not how it works. He's going to be in. It's going to be a learning curve. That being said, I'm all on board with Morlando. I root for him. I want nothing but the best for him. Carter Johnson the same way. I'm going to be following these guys' development throughout the rest of this season, next season, and beyond. But I wanted to say what I would have done, and that would have been Ron Waldschmidt. Anyway, going on from the draft, that was my little spiel about the draft and the first couple rounds. I want to talk about the deadline now. I want to transition into the Marlins' approach for this deadline. And I want to start by talking about Jazz Chisholm Jr. Okay, I mentioned how Jazz has absolutely been on fire the last few games in particular. Absolutely been on fire. Overall, he's having a breakout season. He stayed healthy. And now there's a lot of reports out there in the media that say how clubhouses, teams are worried that he won't fit in the clubhouse, that his attitude is bad. The word brashness was thrown out there. And to me, I think that's terrible. And it's a shame because there's been nothing coming out of Miami, no reporting that Jazz Chisholm Jr. is a bad teammate, a bad person. In fact, everything has been the opposite. He's engaging with the media. He's engaging with the fans. He's a fan favorite. Everybody loves him. All Marlins fans should love Jazz. Most of them do. So to see that be listed as one of the means of concern for opposing front offices, to me, is just a shame. It's a shame. Let his play define him. and his trade value, not the way he plays the game. If the way he played the game was in a disrespectful manner and he's a jerk and treating his opponent badly, bad sportsmanship, so to speak, okay, that's a valid point. But he's not. It's the complete opposite. So it's going to be interesting to see in the next few days, does Jazz get out of Miami? Are the Marlins going to trade him? Now, I have to remind you, he has 2 years left of control. Beyond this year, he has all of 2025, all of 2026. He's a Marlin. He's at an affordable price. Albeit the arbitration is probably going to go up. And we know how the Marlins are with cost and with salaries. But in terms of control, the Marlins don't have to trade him now. There's no urgency. He is not a rental. You don't have to get rid of a contract. But he could get you a big return. And my approach is simple. The way I would handle it is simple. If you don't get a good return, if you don't get a clear win for the Marlins, and it could be a win-win, but it can't be like a C-level grade. Like, it has to be an objective win for the Marlins, where whether you're a prospect lover, if you're more of a I just watch the games, but I understand trades need to happen in order to improve the farm system, everybody has to be on board that this will be a good trade for the Marlins. There can't be a question about it. Like I felt the Luis Arias trade, there were questions about it. And obviously, sides were split. Some people say it was a great return. I didn't like the return. Some people say that was the best return they could get. I don't know. That's neither here nor there. But the point being is with Jazz Chisholm, you have to make sure the return is good. Do not sell short. Do not sell short just because it's the deadline. And it's that simple. If the Yankees, for example, or let's go with the Mariners, a team that needs to make a move now, that one of the worst offenses in all of baseball, if they want to trade for Jazz, but they're not going to give you, a Lazaro Montes, a Harry Ford, one of their top guys, a Cole Young, then don't do it. There's no rush right now. You can wait until the offseason. So the other guy that will be traded, though, is going to be Tanner Scott. I want to give some love to Tanner Scott because right now he might be having the best season ever for a Marlins relief pitcher. He's been that dominant. He's been that good. Every game he goes out and pitches, he gets it done. He gets it done. His ERA, I'm going to pull it up right now, actually. It's approaching 1. It is approaching 1, which is crazy to think about, but he's always had the stuff, and he's turned himself into an all-star. He still struggles with the command at times, and his ERA is a 1.21. He's always struggled with the command, still does, but a 1.21 ERA. He's allowed earned runs in 3 games out of 40-plus games this year, 3 of them. Like, he's been that good. The Marlins should get a good return for him. The Marlins should get a very nice return for him. You look at last year, the Royals end up trading Aroldis Chapman to the Rangers pre-deadline, about a month before the deadline. They get a quality starting pitcher back who's now one of the best in all of baseball, Cole Reagans, one of the best in the American League. And the Marlins are going to have a different approach to that, though. They're not going to go for the guys that can contribute now. Again, I don't like it. I think you want guys who are closer to the majors than not, but they're going to go teenagers. They're going to go guys in A-ball, high A-ball at the most. Tanner Scott should get you a very talented prospect or two back. What you can also do is package him. Package him with Jazz. You know, that only amplifies the return. A team that needs bullpen help as well, like the Mariners, like the Yankees. The Orioles is another team. The Pirates. Pirates have been thrown around recently for Jazz Chisholm Jr. Tanner Scott is going to be an absolute vital piece of a team's bullpen down the stretch. It's exciting to see him go to a contender, and right now the question is who? Which contender gets him, and for what price? Is he going to be packaged in a bigger deal with Jazz or another bullpen piece? Time will tell. That's why I love the trade deadline so much. There's so much speculation and rumors. It feels like Christmas, Christmas in the summer, Christmas in July. Trade deadline is awesome. I've always loved it ever since I was a kid, waking up on deadline day, hopping on the laptop, and just starting to follow the trades, see who goes where. And it's a little more fun, when your team is in it and your team is competing. But with the Marlins, you're out of it. You know that. You have to make this deadline count. The bullpen, you have a lot of pieces there. AJ Puck is another guy. Tanner Scott is gone. Will the Marlins hold on to AJ Puck, or will they trade him? AJ Puck is a guy that scouts are looking at right now. Had a rough start to the beginning of the year, but goes back to the bullpen and has been nothing short of dominant. The last 10 games or so, he's been lights out. Multiple years of control. Again, that is the one thing that teams love, is multiple years of control. If you have control over a guy, you're going to get a better return back than a rental. Unless the rental is like a superstar, that's just how it is. So that's why Jazz Chisholm Jr., Tanner Scott, AJ Puck, I could all see being moved at this deadline. Tanner Scott for sure. But what I think will define this first half of Peter Bendix and company, their regime here in Miami, is who else gets traded? How do you handle the deadline? Can you find a team? Can you orchestrate a trade to move Josh Bell and get a worthwhile prospect in return? That takes work. It's going to be interesting to see. It's going to be very interesting to see. My prediction, I think Jazz does get traded. I think he gets traded, guys. I think the Marlins are in the position they are in where it's better to trade him now just based on his history, his injury history. The chatter around the clubhouse vibes and so to speak, how much of that is legitimate? How many teams actually believe that? That's something that I also question. Because at the end of the day, Jazz can freaking play baseball. He can play second. Today against the Orioles, made 2 fantastic plays in center. I know people quote the defensive run saved, but, ultimately, it's a new position for him still. He only started last season, and he's made some pretty awesome plays. Yes, he's learning. Yes, it's development. But if you're a team that's getting a young player with power, with speed, with multiple years of control, can play defense, can play second base, that's an excellent profile. That is a prize at the deadline. That can propel a team's lineup. That can infuse energy into the clubhouse. God forbid it's the Atlanta Braves. God forbid it's the Atlanta Braves. I hate the Braves. Okay? I hate the Braves with a passion. It would hurt me deeply to see Jazz Chisholm Jr. get traded to the Braves. Hurt me deeply. Adam Duvall, a couple years ago, we got Alex Jackson in return. That was terrible. To see your franchise cornerstone, face of the franchise, besides Sandy Alcantara, get traded to your rival, that would suck. Please, anybody but the Braves. That's all I got to say. Anybody but the Braves. Speaking of Sandy Alcantara, I miss him pitching, man. I miss Sandy out there. Sandy is one of those guys where he has the attitude and mentality of a bulldog. He is going to come at you. He's going to work hard. He's not going to quit. And he wants to get the job done. 9 innings. That's it. He wants it. Every time he steps on that mound, he wants to go the distance. I love it. And I miss it. I miss seeing him out there. This trade talk has me thinking about next year. I don't want to think about next year, Sandy getting traded. I love Sandy. I want him back in a Marlins uniform on the mound. And he's making progress. Coming off Tommy John surgery. He's making progress. I think he'll be up and ready to go next year with the Marlins opening day. That's my hope, at least. Around baseball as a whole, it's kind of rough being a Marlins fan because you are so dialed into one team. I think I can speak for most people when I say that. I watch the Marlins, and I tend not to watch a ton of other teams. I won't sit there and watch 9 innings of a random game on MLB Network because I'm usually watching the Marlins. But I think it's time to start doing that a little bit more. I don't know. I was sitting on the couch the other night, and I put on MLB Network, and I just watched the Twins and the Phillies. Watch the Twins and the Phillies, 2 random teams. I guess the Phillies not so much, but I like the Twins. I think in the American League, the Twins are one of my favorite teams for sure. I'd love to see make a run in the playoffs if they can even win the division. Former Marlins draft target Brooks Lee over there in Minnesota tearing it up. I wish I could say the same about Jacob Berry in Miami right now, but we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens, how the Marlins finish this year, how they're going to finish. Are they going to finish strong? Are they going to falter? Who's going to get called up? How is the lineup going to change in the next couple months? In September, when we're doing a podcast midway through September and the season's just about over with, who's in the lineup? Are we going to see guys like Victor Mesa Jr.? Are we going to see Troy Johnson ever get a shot? We'll see. I think Mesa Jr. for sure. I think Mesa Jr. should be up right now. I think he deserves a shot to be the center fielder, everyday center fielder for the Marlins, until he isn't. And that's what I said about Xavier Edwards. Xavier Edwards last year had a cup of coffee in the majors, went back down, hitting well above 300 in AAA, gets called up when Tim Anderson was on the bereavement list, I believe, or injured list, and he hits and gets sent back down. Well, why is he sent back down? People were defending it. Oh, he needs more development in AAA. No, he didn't. And now he's in the majors. He's playing every day at shortstop, and he's hitting. Xavier Edwards isn't going to hit for power. He isn't going to, steal 50 bags a season or hit 45 doubles, but he's going to hit, and he gets the job done. It's a professional hitter. He's hitting 368. Leads the team, by the way, in OPS. Small sample size, but still 865 OPS. Goes up there and gets the job done. He's going to stick in the majors for a long time. I think the Marlins have found somebody that they can build around. And if you want to put him at second base, do so. I like that they're keeping him at shortstop. I like that they're giving him every opportunity at shortstop. But shout out to Xavier Edwards, man. Absolutely killing it with Miami right now. He's a hitter, a professional hitter, much like Luis Arias. Very similar in the sense that you're not going to hit for power, not that you just don't put an emphasis on it. You're hitting the ball and you're still being effective. You are still being an effective player by getting base hits. That is one thing that will never not be valued is base hits. So you love to see it. He can anchor the top of a lineup for years to come. Definitely a young building block there in Miami. That's going to do it for today's episode of Marlins 9. As always, you can find me on Twitter at Jeremiah Geiger 2. If you're listening to this on Spotify or Apple, thank you, as always. And if you're watching this on YouTube, hit subscribe, hit the like button, drop a comment to see, what you'd like me to talk about next, any thoughts on this episode. And with that, let's go fish.